The controller slipped from my hands, clattering onto the hardwood floor. My heart pounded as I stared at Ethan, his blue eyes locked on mine. A question hanging in the air, so heavy it could crush us both. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not here, not now, not with him. We'd been friends since freshman year at NYU, bonded over late-night gaming sessions and cheap pizza in our cramped dorm. Ethan was the guy who could make anyone laugh, who always had my back when I flunked a midterm or got ghosted by a date. But tonight, in his tiny Brooklyn apartment, something shifted. It started with a stupid bet over Street Fighter, a challenge to make the night more interesting. Loser owes the winner a secret, Ethan had said, his grin sharp and teasing. I laughed it off, thinking it was just another one of his games. I was wrong. The apartment smelled of coffee and old books, a mix of Ethan's chaotic energy and his love for vintage sci-fi novels. Posters of Blade Runner and Star Wars lined the walls, their edges curling from years of being tacked up and taken down. The couch we sat on was a thrift store find, lumpy but cozy, and the TV flickered with the game's pause screen, casting blue light across the room. Outside, the city hummed. Car horns, distant sirens, the pulse of New York that never slept. We'd been playing for hours, trash-talking and laughing, but the air had thickened with every glance, every accidental brush of our hands reaching for the same controller. I'd always known Ethan was different, not just because he was the only guy I knew who could recite entire Lord of the Rings chapters from memory, but because he saw the world in a way I didn't. He'd talk about life like it was a story he was writing, full of twists and meaning, while I just tried to get through each day without screwing up. Maybe that's why I kept coming back to his place, week after week, even when I had other plans. It wasn't just the games. It was him. "All right, Jake," Ethan said, leaning back, his voice low, almost daring. "You lost. Time to spill." His blonde hair fell into his eyes, and he brushed it away, a move so familiar it shouldn't have made my stomach flip, but it did. I laughed, tried to shake off the tension. "A secret? Dude, you already know I ate your leftover pizza last week. What else you want?" He didn't laugh. Instead, he leaned closer, his knee bumping mine. The room felt smaller, the city noise fading until all I could hear was my own pulse. "Something real," he said. "Something you've never told anyone." I froze. There were things I'd buried deep, things I hadn't even admitted to myself. Growing up in a small town upstate, I'd learned to keep my head down to fit in. My dad was a mechanic, my mom a nurse, and they loved me, but they didn't talk about feelings. Not the kind that made you question who you were. I'd spent years dodging those thoughts, focusing on school, games, anything to keep them at bay. But Ethan had a way of pulling things out of you, like he could see through every wall you built. "I don't know, man," I said, my voice rougher than I meant. "You first." His eyes flickered, like he was weighing something heavy. Then he smiled, but it wasn't his usual cocky grin. It was softer, almost nervous. "Okay," he said, "but you're not going to like it." Before I could respond, he leaned in, closing the distance between us. His lips brushed mine, tentative at first, then firm like he'd made up his mind. The world stopped. My brain screamed to pull back, to laugh it off, to pretend this was just another one of his stupid jokes. But my body didn't listen. I kissed him back, my hands finding his shirt, gripping it like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. When we finally pulled apart, the room was too quiet. Ethan's face was flushed, his eyes searching mine for something, anything. "That's my secret," he whispered. "I wanted to do that for a long time." I couldn't speak. My heart was a war drum, my thoughts a mess of fear and want, and something I didn't have a name for. This was Ethan, my best friend, my safe place, the guy I'd spent countless nights with, laughing until my sides hurt. And now, everything was different. "Jake," he said, his voice barely above a breath. "Say something." But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I grabbed my jacket and bolted for the door, the cold night air hitting me like a slap as I stumbled into the Brooklyn streets. I didn't look back, but I could feel his eyes on me, burning through the distance I was trying to put between us. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "We need to talk." I stared at it for an hour, my thumb hovering over the reply button. I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know what I felt. All I knew was that last night had cracked something open inside me, something I wasn't ready to face. I avoided his place for days, dodging his calls, burying myself in schoolwork and late-night runs through Central Park. But Ethan wasn't the type to let things go. On the 5th day, he showed up at my dorm, leaning against the doorframe like he owned the place, his usual confidence masking something raw in his eyes. "You gonna ghost me forever, Jake?" he asked, his voice light but edged with hurt. "I'm not ghosting you," I lied, shoving my hands in my pockets. "Just busy." He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, pine, and something sharp like the air before a storm. "Bullshit," he said. "You're freaking out, and I get it, but you can't run from this." "I'm not running," I snapped, but my voice betrayed me, shaky and thin. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that I was fine, that we could go back to how things were. But the truth was I wasn't fine. I hadn't been fine since the moment he kissed me, because it woke up something I'd spent years trying to ignore. Ethan didn't push. He just stood there, waiting, like he knew I'd crack eventually. And I did. "Why'd you do it?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Why'd you have to change everything?" He looked at me, his blue eyes steady, unflinching. "Because I'm tired of pretending," he said. "And I think you are too." Those words hit harder than the kiss. They followed me back to my dorm, lingered in my dreams, haunted every quiet moment. I'd always thought I knew who I was. Jake Harper, small-town kid, good at math, decent at video games, straight as an arrow. But Ethan had seen something else, something I'd been too scared to look at. And now, there was no going back. The city felt different after that night, like New York itself was watching me, waiting for me to make a choice. I walked the streets aimlessly, the neon signs of Times Square blurring into streaks of color, the chatter of tourists fading into white noise. Ethan's words echoed in my head. "I'm tired of pretending." What did that even mean? And why did it feel like he'd handed me a puzzle I didn't know how to solve? I grew up in a place where nobody talked about this stuff. My hometown was all picket fences and church potlucks, where being different wasn't just frowned upon. It was erased. I'd seen what happened to kids who didn't fit the mold. Whispers, sidelong glances, a quiet kind of exile. So I kept my head down, dated girls I didn't feel much for, and told myself I was normal. But Ethan had always been different. He wore his weirdness like a badge, unapologetic, unafraid. I envied that, even if I couldn't admit it. A week after the kiss, I couldn't avoid him anymore. We had a group project due for our sociology class, and Ethan was relentless, texting me reminders until I caved and agreed to meet at a coffee shop in the village. The place was crowded, filled with the clatter of cups and the hum of conversation. Ethan was already there, sitting at a corner table, his laptop open but his eyes on the door. When he saw me, he smiled, but it was cautious, like he wasn't sure I'd stay. "Hey," he said, pushing a coffee toward me. "Black, no sugar, right?" I nodded, sitting down, my hands wrapping around the warm cup. "Thanks." We worked in silence for a while, the tension between us thick but not unbearable. I kept stealing glances at him, his focused frown, the way his fingers tapped the table when he was thinking. I wanted to ask him a million things. When did he know? How'd he know? Was he scared? But the words stuck in my throat, heavy and unformed. Finally, he broke the silence. "You're still freaking out, aren't you?" I laughed, a short, nervous sound. "Can you blame me? You dropped a bomb, Ethan." He leaned back, crossing his arms. "I didn't plan it, you know. It just happened. But I'm not sorry." His honesty disarmed me. I wanted to be angry, to blame him for turning my world upside down, but I couldn't, because deep down I knew I'd felt it too. That pull, that spark, that thing I couldn't name. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice quieter than I meant. He shrugged, but his eyes were intense. "We figured out. Together. If you want to." I didn't know what I wanted. That was the problem. I'd spent so long avoiding these feelings that I didn't know how to face them. But sitting there, Watching Ethan sip his coffee, his confidence cracked just enough to show the vulnerability underneath, I felt something shift. Maybe I didn't need all the answers right now. Maybe just being here with him was enough. Over the next few weeks, we fell into a strange new rhythm. We didn't talk about the kiss, but it was there in every glance, every accidental touch. We'd meet up for games or study sessions, and I'd catch myself staring at him, noticing things I hadn't before. The way his laugh lit up his whole face, the freckles across his nose, the way he always knew when I was stressed and would shove a controller in my hand to distract me. But it wasn't all easy. I was still wrestling with myself, with the voice in my head that sounded like my dad saying, "Be a man, Jake." I'd lie awake at night, replaying that kiss, torn between wanting to run back to Ethan's apartment and wanting to run 1,000 miles away. I started noticing things I'd ignored before. Guys holding hands in the park, rainbow flags outside bars in the West Village. New York was a different world from my hometown, but I still felt like an outsider caught between who I'd been and who I might be. One night, we ended up at a dive bar after a long study session. The place was packed, the air thick with cigarette smoke and the thump of bass from a jukebox. Ethan was in his element, charming the bartender, making friends with strangers. I watched him from our corner booth, nursing a beer, feeling like I was seeing him for the first time. He caught my eye and grinned, weaving through the crowd to slide in next to me. "You're quiet tonight," he said, his shoulder brushing mine. "Just thinking," I said, staring at the condensation on my glass. "About what?" I hesitated, then decided to be honest. "About you. About this." His grin softened, and he leaned closer, his voice low. And I'm scared," I admitted. "I don't know what I'm doing, Ethan. I don't even know who I am anymore." He didn't laugh or brush it off. Instead, he reached for my hand under the table, his fingers warm and steady. "You don't have to know," he said. "Not yet. Just don't run away again, okay?" I nodded, my throat tight. His hand stayed in mine, hidden from the world, but it felt like a lifeline. For the first time, I let myself imagine what it would be like to stop fighting, to let myself feel what I'd been pushing down for so long. It was terrifying, but it was also freeing. Fear is a funny thing. It's not just a feeling. It's a weight, a shadow that follows you, whispering lies about who you're supposed to be. Every time I looked at Ethan, that shadow loomed larger, but so did the pull to step out from under it. We started spending more time together, not just as friends, but as something undefined, something fragile. Late-night gaming sessions turned into long talks on his fire escape, the city sprawling below us like a map of possibilities. Ethan would tell me about growing up in Boston, about the moment he realized he was gay, about the fights with his parents that left scars he didn't show the world. I listened, soaking in his courage, wondering if I could ever be that brave. One night, under a sky bruised with clouds, he asked me about my family. I told him about my dad's garage, my mom's endless shifts at the hospital, the way they'd raised me to be steady, reliable, normal. "They wouldn't get this," I said, gesturing vaguely between us. "They'd think it's wrong." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "Do you think it's wrong?" I wanted to say no, but the word caught in my throat. Instead, I shook my head, staring at the skyline. "I don't know what I think anymore. All I know is I don't want to lose you." He reached for my hand, his touch grounding me. "You won't," he said. "But you got to be honest with yourself, Jake. You can't live for them forever." His words stung, but they were true. I'd spent my life trying to be the son my parents wanted, the guy who didn't make waves. But with Ethan, I was starting to see a different version of myself, one who could take risks, who could feel things I'd been taught to bury. It was exhilarating, but it was also a tightrope, and I was terrified of falling. The turning point came at a campus pride event. Ethan had convinced me to go, saying it'd be low-key, just a few booths and some music in the quad. I was nervous, my palms sweaty as we walked through the crowd, rainbow flags fluttering in the breeze. Everyone seemed so open, so sure of themselves. I felt like an imposter, like any second someone would call me out for not belonging. Ethan, of course, was in his element, chatting with people, grabbing free stickers, even dancing to some pop song blaring from a speaker. I hung back, watching him, my chest tight with a mix of admiration and envy. He caught my eye and waved me over, his grin infectious. "Come on, Jake, live a little." I hesitated, then joined him, letting him pull me into a clumsy dance. For a moment, I forgot to be scared. I forgot to care what anyone thought. It was just me and Ethan, laughing under the autumn sun, the world fading away. But then I saw her, Sarah, a girl from my hometown who'd ended up at NYU. She was standing across the quad, her eyes wide, her phone already in her hand. My stomach dropped. I knew that look. I knew what came next. Small towns talk, and Sarah loved to gossip. "Jake," Ethan's voice pulled me back. He followed my gaze, his smile fading. "You okay?" I shook my head, stepping back. "I need to go." He grabbed my arm, gentle but firm. "Don't do this. Don't run." But I did. I pulled away and left, my heart racing, my mind a blur of panic. By the time I got back to my dorm, my phone was buzzing with a text from Sarah. "Didn't know you were into that scene. Your dad's gonna flip." The words felt like a punch, confirming every fear I'd ever had. I turned off my phone and curled up on my bed, the weight of that shadow heavier than ever. Ethan didn't let me hide for long. 2 days later, he showed up at my dorm again, this time with a pizza and a determined look. "We're talking," he said, pushing past me. "No more running." I wanted to argue, but I was tired of fighting, tired of pretending. We sat on my floor, the pizza box between us, and I told him everything. About Sarah, about my parents, about the fear that had been choking me since I was a kid. He listened, not interrupting, just letting me spill it all. When I finished, he leaned forward, his voice steady. "Jake, you're not alone in this. I'm here, and whatever happens with your family, you're still you. You're still worth something." His words broke something in me, something I've been holding together for too long. I reached for him, pulling him into a hug, my face buried in his shoulder. He held me back, strong and steady, and for the first time, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I could be okay. Winter came to New York, blanketing the city in snow and silence. Ethan and I were closer than ever, but we were still tiptoeing around what we were to each other. We'd hold hands in private, steal kisses in his apartment. But out in the world, I was still too scared to show it. Every time I thought about being open, I saw Sarah's text, heard my dad's voice, felt that shadow creeping back. Ethan was patient, but I could tell it wore on him. He'd joke about it sometimes, calling me his secret boyfriend, but there was an edge to his voice, a question he didn't ask. "When are you going to stop hiding?" I didn't have an answer. I was falling for him, hard, but the thought of my family finding out, of losing them, kept me locked in place. One night, we were at his place, curled up on the couch watching The Matrix. The room was warm, the city quiet under a fresh layer of snow. Ethan's head was on my shoulder, his breathing soft and steady. It felt so right, so easy, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. What if someone saw us? What if word got back to my parents? What if I wasn't strong enough for this? "You're thinking too loud," Ethan mumbled, not lifting his head. I laughed, but it was hollow. "Sorry." He sat up, looking at me with those piercing blue eyes. "What's going on, Jake? You're here, but you're not here." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I'm trying, Ethan. I just don't know how to do this. What if my family cuts me off? What if I lose everything?" He took my hand, his grip firm. "You won't lose me. And you're not losing yourself. You're finding yourself. There's a difference." I wanted to believe him, but the fear was still there, gnawing at me. "What if I'm not ready?" I asked. "Then we wait," he said simply. "But you can't keep living for other people's expectations. You deserve to be happy, Jake. We both do." His words stayed with me, sinking in deeper than I expected. I started to imagine a life where I wasn't hiding, where I could hold his hand in public, introduce him as more than just my friend. It was a dream that felt both impossible and within reach. The breaking point came during winter break. I went home to my parents' house upstate. a small brick rancher surrounded by snow-covered fields. I hadn't planned to tell them anything, but Sarah's gossip had beaten me there. My mom was quiet at dinner, her eyes avoiding mine. My dad, though, wasn't subtle. He cornered me in the garage, his face hard. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice low, like he was afraid of the answer. "What's Sarah's been saying? About you and some guy?" My heart stopped. I wanted to lie, to say it was all a misunderstanding, but Ethan's words echoed in my head. You can't keep living for other people's expectations. I took a deep breath, my hands shaking. "Yeah," I said. "It's true." The silence that followed was deafening. My dad's face twisted, a mix of anger and disbelief. "You're not that way, Jake. You're not." "I am," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "I'm in love with him, Dad. His name's Ethan, and he's everything." He stared at me like I was a stranger. Then he turned and walked out, leaving me alone in the cold garage. My mom came to me later, her eyes red, and hugged me without saying a word. It wasn't acceptance, but it was something, a crack in a wall I'd always thought was unbreakable. When I got back to the city, Ethan was waiting for me at the train station. I hadn't told him what happened, but he knew. He always knew. He pulled me into a hug, right there in the middle of Penn Station, and I didn't pull away. For the first time, I didn't care who saw us. I told them, I said, my voice muffled against his coat. He pulled back, searching my face. And it sucked, I said, laughing through tears. But I'm here, with you. He smiled, that bright, fearless smile that had drawn me to him in the first place. "That's all I need," he said, and kissed me, soft and sure, as the world moved around us. Spring arrived, painting New York in shades of green and gold. Ethan and I were no longer just roommates or friends. We were us, a couple, navigating a world that felt both brand new and terrifyingly real. I was still learning to live out loud, to let go of the fear that had defined me for so long. But with Ethan by my side, it felt possible. We moved in together that summer, into a tiny apartment in the East Village. It was a shoebox, with creaky floors and a view of a brick wall, but it was ours. We'd stay up late, playing games or talking about the future, dreaming of a life where we didn't have to hide. Ethan wanted to travel, to see the world. I just wanted to build a life with him, one where I could be the person I was starting to recognize in the mirror. My parents were still a work in progress. My mom called sometimes, asking careful questions about Ethan, about school. My dad didn't talk to me, but I held on to hope that one day he might. I'd learned from Ethan that love wasn't just about acceptance. It was about patience, about showing up even when it hurt. One evening, we went to a rooftop party hosted by some friends from the Pride event. The city sparkled below us, a sea of lights stretching to the horizon. Ethan was laughing, his arm around my shoulders, and I felt a warmth I'd never known before. I wasn't hiding anymore. I wasn't running. I was just Jake, in love with Ethan, and that was enough. As the party wound down, we stood at the edge of the roof, looking out over the city. Ethan turned to me, his eyes catching the glow of the skyline. "You ever think about how far we've come?" he asked. I nodded, my hand finding his. "I went to your place just to play games," I said, smiling. "And you changed everything." He laughed, pulling me close. "Worth it," he whispered, and kissed me as the city hummed below us, alive with possibility. Looking back, I realized that love wasn't just about the big moments, the kisses, the confessions, the fights. It was about the small things. The way Ethan always saved me the last slice of pizza, the way he'd hum off-key while doing dishes, the way he believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. It was about choosing each other every day, even when it was hard. Our story wasn't perfect. There were still days when doubt crept in, when I worried about what people thought, when I missed the simplicity of who I used to be. But Ethan taught me that love was worth the mess, worth the fear, worth the risk. He showed me that being true to yourself wasn't just about courage. It was about finding someone who made you want to be brave. In the end, it wasn't just about us. It was about every person out there, scared to take that first step, to say the words, to live their truth. Our story was a reminder that love, in all its forms, was a fight worth fighting. And as I stood there, holding Ethan's hand, I knew I'd fight for it every single day.